Thank you for joining us for this training session. This is a web-based training, and what we're going to cover today is going to be 21 CFR parts 210 and 211. This is an overview of the regulations. For really in-depth, thorough training on this, you would need to contact us, get a little bit more information on the depth and complexity, especially any specific questions you might have, anything specific industry related issues that you may have with this. So that being said, let me go on with this. And let me tell you this up front. The success that you will have in your job will be your knowledge of the GMPs. You will have to understand them. You will have to apply those concepts that are presented in the GMPs into your particular context. Each company is different. Therefore, you're going to find very general descriptions in here of GMPs. And that's probably the number one complaint we get from people, is that we don't understand why there's not really specific guidance in the GMPs. And it's really designed to give you an understanding of what they want, what the FDA is looking for. Not to tell you how to do it, just to give you some guidance on what they're looking for. So let's go ahead and get started here. The mystery of what the GMPs are. It's Title 21 of the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. And that is really designed as part of the legal code. And you'll hear me talking about the code in here quite a bit. This particular section deals with drugs. There is another section that deals with devices. And if you're dealing with devices only, you probably need to rethink taking this unless you're just really wanting to understand those. But this one deals specifically with the drugs. The C in the cGMP stands for current. Let me define current for you. It is contemporaneous. It is today. It is always changing. And what you think of as current today, 2 years, 5 years, certainly 10 years from now, will not be the same. You really have to keep on top of the current status of these requirements, the GMPs. How do you do that? Well, you attend webinars like this, you go to training, you bring people in, you go to conferences, seminars, whatever it is, and you understand what the FDA is currently seeking in relation to compliance. The federal law is the GMP. This is not a state requirement. This is not a local requirement. This is not a corporate requirement. This is federal law. It comes from the United States government. And these guides are written certainly to clarify the GMPs. You'll find many guides out there. If you go out to the FDA website, fda.gov, G-O-V, that you will find many guidance documents. So you just go out and look for that. If you have a question, you can't find it, or anything specific, certainly send us an email. We can look for that and hopefully find that for you and send you some updates on it. So part 210, let's get started with this. This is the beginning of this. It talks about the regulations set forth here are minimum requirements. And I can tell you, if you follow what's written in the code right now, you will not be in the C of the cGMPs. These have been updated just in practice over many years. And what you see there are minimal requirements. This covers manufacturing, the facilities, the equipment, the controls, and it covers various aspects of what's going on. Failure to comply with these GMPs means that your product is considered to be adulterated. That means it does not comply with federal regulations, and the person who is responsible for the failure to comply, shall be subject to regulatory action. Understand, if you are in quality, if you're in operations, if you're in R&D, if you do anything related to GMPs, you're held accountable. And you really need to take that into the mind and understand when you are dealing with this, there's some serious consequences for not complying. So let me give you a few questions here before we get started. Number one here, who at your operation, at your company, is responsible for quality? Second thing, what do you do for quality? What do you do for that? And how do you handle any legal documents? So let's go back and think on the first one here. Who at your facility is responsible for quality? If you say it's the quality department or the laboratory or those people, you're incorrect. And I can tell you right now, everyone is responsible for quality. So that really builds into the next question is, what do you do for quality? And that doesn't mean what do I do for quality assurance? What do I do for quality control? That means what do I do for quality? Meaning anything I do is quality. Think of it like this. The quality of whatever you fill in the blank. The quality of the work I do. The quality of the document that I'm presenting, the quality of the water that I'm cleaning with, the quality of my work. Whatever it is, think about the quality of that. And is it appropriate? Is it sufficient? How do I know that what I'm doing is correct? You really have to think of these things. And the last one here, do you handle any legal documents? And hopefully, if you deal with anything in a company, you do. You sign something, you're handling things, you're filing things, you handle legal documents. I can tell you, if you sign in a log, if you sign a receiving form, if you sign that I've witnessed something, those are all legal documents that have been and will be brought as testimony or as evidence that you performed a particular action. That's why it's critically important for you to understand that when you sign something, what does that signature mean? What am I signing for? What is that? Am I signing that I did this, in which I didn't? Am I signing that I saw something added to the product that I was over on the other side of the room and didn't see? Those are really hard things for you to sign for and then be called into question and say, well, I really didn't do that, but I signed for it. And let me give you some stories on that particular one. There have been many companies that have tested a product and found that there was no active in it. It was completely void. And come to find out that, the person forgot to charge in the active ingredient. But you know what? The batch record showed 2 people signed for it, that it was added. The one person took in mind that, I think I added it. The container's gone. I must have added it. And the second person signed saying, well, I was overworking. He always adds this material in, so I'm just signing that it was done. That second person that signed that they witnessed it is really more in trouble than the one who signed saying they did it. They both have issues, but I tell you, be very, very careful what you sign for. So let's get back to the regulations on this. The applicability, section 210.2, applies to drug products for human use. This is not veterinary med. Go into some of the definitions in 210.3, and what we're talking about here is really the baseline. Without a formal lexicon, without formal knowledge of what you're dealing with and how we're speaking, it becomes problematic. So it's critically important that you get down some of the definitions here. Act in the GMPs means the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So if you see act in there, that's what it means. This is federal. A batch indicates a specific quantity of that material. intended to have this uniform character and quality. So you make a batch, it's uniform, correct? And it's a single manufacturing order in some type of cycle. That's what that stands for. The next one is a component. I'll let you look at that one there. It's any ingredient intended for use, including those things that may not appear in that drug product. What may be I talking about with this? That would be many times if you think of water. If you have a dry product, anything that may be granulated, wet granulation, that you put water or some type of liquid into it and it's dried off. Water is not part of the final dosage form, certainly to no great measure, but it is included as a component of that product because it's part of the manufacturing process. Go on with this. Your drug product means your finished dosage form, that whatever that happens to be. A fiber, this is one of those unique areas where the FDA gives you a real specific definition. It's a particulate with a length at least 3 times its width. Now the question comes up, well, what if it's not 3 times its width? I guess that becomes a particulate. It's not a fiber. Active ingredient, any component intended to furnish some type of pharmacological activity. We all think of things that are actives, anything hydrocodone, methadone, anything along those types of lines that would be construed as the active. The binders, all of those things are the inactives. Continuing with this, the drug is defined by the Act as any compound has the effect of diagnosing, curing, mitigating all these things in man. You can see all that there. It really defines what it is. So really, you could think of almost anything as being a drug, quote unquote, but this really defines it here. In-process material, any material that's made, put together, whatever it is, for use in the drug product. And that you can understand as you have in-process materials coming along until you get to that finished dosage form. Manufacturing, processing, packaging, holding includes everything really. Packaging, labeling, testing, QC activities of the drug product. Don't think that it is leaving anything out. All activities in your operations are covered by the GMPs. Quality control is any person or unit designated by the firm to be responsible for those duties relating to quality control. Now, the thing that you will not find defined in the drug GMPs is QA, quality assurance. Quality assurance didn't exist at the time in which these GMPs came about, and it's been a number of years ago now. And so right now you have QC. Typically in the world, if I ask someone what QC is, they think laboratory. And QA is the compliance branch or the quality branch. At the time of this, quality control covered everything. So don't forget that fact that you are indeed part of a quality control function. It may not be the department, but all of us are involved in some type of quality control or control of the quality. Representative sample, samples drawn on rational criteria intended to accurately portray that material being sampled. So you go in, you take samples off the top. Does it really represent the entirety of the batch in the drum or in a container? You have to make sure that you think about your samples that you're testing or retaining as being representative of the batch. Now, I spoke about this here a moment ago. What is missing out of all this? There's that large body out there that certainly is not part of that. And again, it's quality assurance. And again, I want to stress this. This is important to understand that quality assurance is construed as the quality unit. And it's defined in the device regulations, which is great. You can go there and look at that, or if you need some definition of that, just send us an email. Let us know you'd like to have a little bit more definition of a quality assurance unit, and we'll certainly send that along to you. Now, let's get into part 211. That is really the meat of the regulations. This is where you're going to find a lot of the detail about what we really do day in and day out. There are 11 subparts identified by letters A through K, and those will be clearly delineated in this presentation. So you'll see all of that. It covers everything, operations all the way through. And again, let me tell you this, these are designed to be general. It encompasses everything. There are a few sections in there that talk about specifics, but there really is a goal to this. And that goal is to tell you what to do, not how to do it. And what they're saying is, thou shalt have X. And it doesn't say thou shalt do A, B, and C to get X. That's not the FDA, and that's not intended to be part of the GMPs. Let's go into Subpart A. This is some of the general provisions here. They talk about scope of this, some of the definitions. They set some of the minimum requirements, talk about it applying to human drugs. And again, some of the definitions that we just read are applicable in this section. Subpart B, and that first part is just some of the general type of things. B here, we get into organization and personnel. It says specifically that there will be responsibilities of the QC unit, delineated. It talks about personnel qualifications, and it talks about personnel responsibilities. So this is about the company, and then the last part of it talks about consultants like myself and others in this organization. And so it gives you some idea of what you want to have in place. Go into detail with this. Responsibilities of the QC unit is that there shall be a QC unit. That certainly seems to be without thought that, yeah, there should be one in place. They have the responsibility and the authority to approve or reject all things that go on in the organization, the components that come in, the containers that you use, the closures that you use, any in-process material, any packaging, labeling, whatever it is, and certainly ultimately the drug product. They have the ability to oversee those types of actions and to approve that, yes, those things are meeting the criteria, or know that they are not, and to reject them as needed. They have the authority to review production records, anything that's made and documentation-wise, electronically or physically, that they have the authority to review those, and that if errors have occurred in any type of operation, that they've been fully investigated. And that means that they've investigated it all over, and not just cursory, just to get the product out the door, but that it has been fully investigated. You might as well underline that fully type of question or word there, because that's going to be the question to you. Did you fully investigate something? Go on with this. The QC unit shall have adequate laboratory facilities. Again, look at that word, adequate. Define adequate for me. In your operation, their operation, it's going to be a totally different definition of the term adequate. So you have to be able to show that your operations, whatever they are, have the adequate laboratory facilities to do the task that you're supposed to do. They shall have the responsibility for approving or rejecting all procedures, SOPs, or specifications impacting the quality of the drug product, whatever it happens to be. And the responsibilities of the quality control unit, that includes, again, laboratory and quality assurance, is in writing, and it shall be followed. Meaning, if you say that you're going to do something, that you do it. It's not just in word there for people to see and it looks good, that you actually follow it. If you do not follow it, why do you have it in writing? You have to really explain that, and that's going to get you in trouble. So make sure that you have everything down in writing, what you do. Make sure, again, you follow it. 211.25, personnel qualifications, talks about what you have to have in order to operate in your company. Everyone, underline that, everyone shall have the education, training, and experience, or a combination thereof, to do their job. So what job do you do? And how shall I know as an inspector that you have the education, training, and experience to do that task? Where is it? And that means everyone, from the janitor, the line operators, the inspectors, people in the warehouse, all the way up to your executives. If an executive looks at data and they make a decision, are we in control? Are we in compliance? What do we do? They're making a GMP decision. You have to have the education, training, and experience to do that task. The thing that I often find that's lacking is to go in and find the executives having no GMP training at all and cite them for it, that, hey, you're here. Do you look at GMP data? Do you make decisions on GMP perspective? Are you ultimately responsible for all the operations in a GMP compliant facility? You have to answer yes as an executive. Then if you have no GMP training, you're in violation of this section of the code. Everyone who supervises those people shall have that education, training, or experience to assign the functions and to oversee that. Just what I spoke about here. And there shall be adequate number of qualified people to do those tasks. Whatever that adequate number is, and you qualify the people to do the task. Again, going back to understanding what is the education, training, and experience necessary to do what job you've assigned them to. So you come in and you say, what's my job description? How do I know I have the ability to do all the tasks that are listed on my job description? I better have that down. 211.28. I'm going to talk about wearing clean clothing and protective apparel appropriate to the task that you're doing. Practice good sanitation and health habits. Pretty typical type of situation here. I often tell people, if you clean things or if you're operating in an area and you wouldn't want to take that piece of equipment and eat dinner off of it, then it probably is not sanitary and you probably aren't practicing good health habits with it. Limited access areas as needed. Just make sure that not everybody has access to certain areas. Certainly if you have narcotics or anything along that line, there's some DEA requirements for that. But this says here in the GMPs that not everybody can go into all areas. There are limitations, especially if you get into the laboratory, if you get into stability areas, if you get into raw material storage areas, operational areas. Those should be cordoned off or blocked access to people who don't need to be there. Make sure you think those things through. And if you are sick, the question is, do you belong in that area? And that comes to the question, if you're sick, have open sores, bleeding, things like that, you don't need to be there. You need to be somewhere else. You need to go to your supervisor with those types of issues, and you should have a policy, hopefully your company does, on what do you do if a person is sick or has a problem. 211.34, this gets into consultants and the fact, very similar to operations and people working in a company, that we shall have the sufficient education, training, experience to advise you on the subject matter. I wouldn't hire a mechanic to come in to do brain surgery, you shouldn't hire someone to come in to give you GMP experience and knowledge and feedback from a person who doesn't have sufficient knowledge or training or experience to do those tasks. So make sure all consultants have that. Records have to be maintained stating the name, address, qualifications of consultants. So typically when we are coming in to provide you with service, the thing that we automatically do is give you our CVs and you have all of our information. This is who we are so that you have it in your records. Subpart C, this deals with various things here, more facility oriented, and I'm not going to read all these off to you. They're here for you to see. Let's go through these specifically. 211.42, the building. Certainly the building, whatever it happens to be, is maintained to facilitate the cleaning, maintenance, and proper operation of it. That means it's maintained in a good state of control. You have to look around. Is it maintained that way? Does it facilitate cleaning, or do I have cracks? Do I have broken holes in the wall? Do I have issues that are going on? Can I maintain it? Can I properly operate in an area where it isn't properly controlled? You have to have, again, adequate space. There's that word again. You define it, make sure that you have adequate space to do your operation. A good story about this, walking into a facility, we saw a tank and it was manually cleaned, and the people there were telling us that the operators go in the tank and they take a brush on a handle and they clean the inside of the tank, and you could clearly see some piping that had been added above the tank where the opening of the tank was blocked by the piping that was added. So a simple question was, can you open the lid and show us how you do that? And they open it and it was clank, clank, clank like this. And they were trying to show us that you were getting in with a brush, getting in there. It really didn't facilitate the proper cleaning of that. So the spacing was certainly a question there. Operations performed in defined areas. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you have a specific area in which to do those functions. You wouldn't want to have raw material sampling performed out in the hallway. Just some of this stuff is just common sense. Think about penicillin. If you do penicillin, you have to have a separate area, separate facility. If you do penicillin operations, there are some really specific controls you have to have in place. Make sure that if you have people coming in from outside or in different operations, different campuses in which you may have operators working or people working, or if you have contractors coming in, make sure they aren't coming to you from a penicillin facility. If they are, more than likely they're carrying into your facility some penicillin or cephalosporin type of issues. So make sure you've got yourself covered from that aspect. 21144 and 46 talks about lighting, that you'll have adequate lighting shall be provided. Again, don't know what that is. You should define it and make sure that you understand that whatever that is. If you understand lumen or lux, that you monitor that. Make sure that you can see things to do the task that you're trying to do. 21146 talks about adequate ventilation, that it is there adequately enough to control the environment to the process or product that you're making, whatever it is, micro controls, dust controls, pressure controls, that everything is controlled to control the product, to deliver a product that is pure, safe, and effective at the end. And the last thing here is air filtration is provided. Whatever level that's needed, you define it, understand why it is that you have that level of control in place, and that you meet those requirements. 21148 talks about plumbing, and that you'll have potable water supplied under a continuous positive pressure, and that the system is free of defects, that you don't have rusty pipe, you don't have broken things, you don't have leaks going on. Those are some things that are really problematic. Potable water should meet EPA requirements as specified here, and the drains should be of adequate size to facilitate the water or liquid that's flowing out. Don't have it backing up into the area. You want to make sure that those drains actually can capture the liquid and drain it out. And just a quick guidance on that too, make sure you clean those drains and that those are maintained in a sanitary manner. Air brakes provided on your drains. Problem came about many years ago, and you still see a little bit today in sinks that are present where you clean things, you put stuff down in the sink, that there's a drain pipe that comes off of it. Sometimes there's a backup, there's a problem with the water, and it backs up into the drain or into the sink from the drain. And so you have to have an air brake there or backflow preventer. So if there's a backup, it doesn't come back into the sink or doesn't come back into the room. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you control those types of things. 21150 and 52 talks about sewage and refuse here. Dispose of the trash, sewage, hopefully you dispose of that. Any other refuse in a safe and sanitary manner. Pretty simple type of stuff. And you have to have washing and toilet facilities, adequate number of those types of things provided, making sure that people are able to go in there and use the restroom facilities, and that you're able to wash your hands and clean your hands as you're done. You have to have hot and cold potable water. It's provided in those things, and along with that, certainly soap, detergent that's there. You'll have air dryers that for your hands as you go in and you do these things. You go into a restaurant anymore, many times they'll have the air dryer there, or you have single service towels. It's not something you go in and typically many of us at home have a towel and you go by and you dry your hands off on that. You want to have those single use towels there, and you dry your hands, you throw that away. And easy access to the working areas from the bathroom, and that way people are able to get back and forth between those areas. Sanitation, 21156 with this. Your facilities should be maintained in a clean and sanitary manner, making sure that everything is in control, free of anything that you don't want there. I can tell you, if you don't want it in your home, you certainly don't want it in a pharmaceutical or drug operation. Birds, rats, whatever it is, you don't want them in there. Biggest problem typically seen out there would be ants. In the summer, the ants come in looking for water or a cool environment, and that's typically one of the biggest things that you'll find out there going on. That you shall have a written procedure on how you maintain sanitation, the methods that you do, the equipment, materials, whatever it is. Usually I see this in a procedure, and you'll come by and you'll have a log where you do all these types of activities and check your tin cats, your glue traps, things like that. So make sure that you have something written on that. There shall be written procedures for rodenticides, insecticides, fungicides, whatever it is you use. How you use it, where you use it, what you're using. Can you have operations going on in the area while you're putting some of the stuff down, which is a big no. You have to prevent contamination of your product from these things. So it's very critically important that you think these things through. This is one of those items that usually people do at night or off shift, and it's out of sight, out of mind, but it can have a massive, massive impact on your operations if you do this incorrectly. 21158 talks about maintenance. Facilities shall be maintained in a good state of repair. Pretty simple, straightforward type of concept. Make sure that your facilities look good, are cleanable, clean, and able to be maintained. Part D with this talks about equipment. And going on with this, you can see some of these items here. But let's go on here. 21163, 21165. Equipment shall be of appropriate design, size, suitably located to facilitate how you use it, how you clean it, and how you maintain it. 21165 says that the equipment shall be constructed of material that's not reactive to the product. If your product is reactive with stainless steel, obviously you do not want to have stainless steel tanks. Usually you'll find this with steel, certainly a lot of plastics or polymers, anything along that line. Sometimes products react negatively to those. So you have to really understand your product and how it reacts with the equipment in which it will be processed. Lubricants and coolants shall not come into contact with your product or your product contact surfaces to alter the product quality. Make sure that you don't have any leaks in anything. Make sure that you have lubricants that are food grade, stuff like that. Really think these things through and verify that you do not have anything that's going to impact your quality of your product. 21167, equipment and utensils shall be cleaned, maintained, and sanitized. Make sure that there's a schedule in place for that. Make sure there's some written procedures for that, how you do it, what tools do you use, what cleaning agents do you use, how long do you leave it on, how do you rinse it off, how do you know it's cleaned? Those are questions I typically ask people. We typically ask people, how do you do those types of things? Make sure that you've got that clearly defined. The maintenance of those types of things, cleaning, sanitizing, inspection, all those things, whatever it is, you have records of those types of activities. 21168 talks about automatic or mechanical equipment, things that we typically see out there now constantly. I both have seen these things. We all go out and we see the automated type of things. Well, the question you have to have with it is, how do I maintain those things in a state of control? So it says here, any of those things that are used out there shall be routinely calibrated, checked, and inspected to make sure that they're in control. You have to calibrate them, you have to inspect them. You put canned data in, you get canned data out. You put weight sets on things. You make sure that the electronic feed is going over to a printer correctly. Whatever it is, you make sure that those things are controlled and checked. And lastly, with this, change controls of those things are in place. You have input and output verification, and you have backups of the data software that may be utilized with these. If you have software associated with it, this gets into the computer validation aspects of it. So just make sure that you've got something in place to cover yourself on this. 21172 talks about filters. Filters should not be releasing fibers into your drug products. If fiber releasing filters are used, there's some specific requirements here about that. Use of asbestos containing filter is allowed only if you have a letter from God, and that's tough. Let me say that there's a lot of safety and effectiveness things that have to be considered here. I would highly say don't use asbestos containing filters unless you absolutely have to. I have never seen anyone have to use those. That doesn't mean that it isn't in place. You might have to. Just make sure that you think these things through. Subpart E, some general comments here about containers and closures, components, things like that. These are some of the sections here that go into those aspects, these last two pages. 21180, the general aspect of it. You have written procedures for the receipt, sampling, approval, rejection, whatever it is you do for these components, these types of materials, you have it down in writing. You have to handle them and store them to prevent contamination, meaning up off the floor, you don't have water, you don't have insects, stuff like that. Bagged or boxed items stored off the floor, adequate space for cleaning, and inspection. And each container has to be identified with a code for each lot received and the status, such as, is it quarantined? Is it approved? Is it rejected? 21182 talks about receipt and storage of any untested items. You'll perform visual inspection for correctness, making sure that the items that you receive are the proper material, that they haven't been damaged, they're not contaminated, whatever it is upon receipt. And items will be quarantined until they're inspected and released. 21184 talks about testing and approval or rejection of these items. Each lot shall be held until it's released by the quality control unit. And I should say until it's dispositioned by the quality control unit, because it could be released, it could be rejected. Sampling is based upon some type of appropriate criteria, whatever that happens to be. And samples may have to be cleaned where necessary. They have to be obtained in a way to prevent contamination. Don't open them up in the hallway. Don't open them up outside the containers in which you take out a raw material. Sterile equipment may be used as necessary. You have no compositing of subdivided samples where you're trying to see striation or levels of the purity or uniformity in a container. You have to ID those samples, and you have to say that a sample was taken from that container. 21184 here continued. Sample testing, conduct at least one identity test on those things. You have to test components for the conformity to those specifications. You can do a certificate of analysis if you have some system in place to verify that your supplier is indeed approved and controlled. You have to test containers for conformity to specification. You may have to do a micro test if appropriate. You have to establish contamination specs if it's subject to contamination. And you have to conduct a micro test on things if it is construed as objectionable to the product. Any lot of components, drug product containers or closures that meet these appropriate specs of identity, strength, quality, purity, and related tests may be approved and released for use. Only after it meets all that, meeting the appropriate specs for identity, strength, quality, purity, and any related tests. Very critical for you to think these things through. Any lot that doesn't do that shall be subject to rejection. 21186, use of approved components. It talks about using FIFO. FIFO means first in, first out, when possible. If you cannot use FIFO, you have to have justification for when you do that and document it and show why you didn't use FIFO. Retesting of those approved components after storing for whatever period of time that they're being held. If they're exposed to something that's abnormal, like air, heat, moisture, something like that, make sure you evaluate those. Rejected components, specific here, that they're identified and quarantined to prevent their use. A C of the cGMPs for that particular item is that rejected components are stored very much removed from typically the area in which you have the rest of the material stored. And it is usually stored in some type of caged, locked area that very few people have access to. You want to make sure that there is absolutely no way for people to use rejected material. The containers and closures shall not be reactive, additive, or absorptive to your product. Provide protection from external factors to make sure that those things do not get contaminated or deteriorate. They have to be clean and suitable for their use, i.e. may be sterilized, may have to be washed, whatever it is. There are written standards, test methods to be followed, including how you do those types of things like cleaning, sterilization, whatever it is in place. Make sure you've got written procedures and methods of how to do that. Subpart F talks about production and process controls. This is a pretty good section here. 211-100 talks about written procedures and deviations. You shall have written procedures for production and process controls to make sure that what you make, again, look at the wording here. It's the same as we saw before. The identity, strength, quality, purity of the product is ensured. It has to be approved by the QA/QC unit. I put that in there, the quality assurance unit, to make sure that you were aware that they are part of the quality unit. Now, those procedures shall be followed, and the execution of that production or process control functions shall be recorded contemporaneously when you do it. That doesn't mean you go in and do something and then an hour later you document it. Now, there may be some caveats to that. If I have to go through and write down that I clean a piece of equipment, I go through and clean it and put it off to the side. When I'm done, I go over and sign that, yes, I cleaned this piece of equipment. That doesn't mean your hands are all soapy and you go back and you have to fill this out right then and there, but it means you have to do post haste, go over and fill it out. Any deviations to any of these activities shall be recorded and those deviations justified. Each batch formulation should attempt to make 100% of the specified active ingredient. If you say 20 milligrams, you can't formulate to 25 milligrams unless it's really clear as to what is going on in the process, that 5% extra is being used up, whatever in loss, and it's very clearly controlled. You formulate targeting 100%, and it says here it should attempt to make that 100%. Now, it may mean that you over charge that with formulation, but you have to be very, very, very clear as to why you're doing that. When that component is transferred to a non-original container, say I'm taking a raw material out of the master container, putting it over into something else, I have to ID that container with specific information as laid out here. Why? Because I want to be able to track that back and make sure what is in that container. It's not just a white powder or a clear liquid. What is that? What lot number is it? When did you put it in? Those are the types of things that you need to know. Supervision of the weighing operations is performed. It has to be of QC released material. The weight measurement is correct per the batch record, and containers are properly identified. Each component added to a batch will have verification by a second person or by a mechanical means. Now, that is current cGMP. People add in materials and it's done remotely by a control, an HMI, human machine interface, that I add in 100 kilos of this liquid and it's stopped. I don't have a second person standing there seeing that I did this. I'm the one doing it, and it's recorded by a mechanical means, electronically, that yes, that was done. That's your second person. So just to give you a little bit of update to how that can be looked at today. Calculation of your yield. Actual yields and percentages of theoretical yields shall be determined at the end of each appropriate phase of production. You define what's appropriate, and you have to look at it and say, where does it make sense that I need to understand what the yield is on a particular set of steps beforehand? Those calculations verified independently by a second person. Your 211-105 equipment ID, all containers, lines, whatever it is, major equipment used during production shall be identified to indicate the contents of the batch and the phase if necessary. Major equipment shall be uniquely identified and shown in the batch record to indicate the specific equipment used. Room number, equipment ID number, whatever it happens to be. Now, major equipment, that does not mean a scoop has to be identified. That means the V-blender has to be identified. The tablet press has to be identified to make sure that you understand what piece of equipment that was used on. 211.110, sampling and testing of any in-process material in the drug product. Procedures shall indicate in-process controls and tests to validate the performance, to show that, yes, these are performing as intended, and to monitor the output of that. Whatever it happens to be, listed some items here, you have to verify that you have those in control. In-process specs shall be consistent with final specs. You have to have some linkage between an in-process value and a finished product value. In-process materials shall be tested for ID, quality, strength, purity, whatever it is, and be accepted or rejected by a quality control unit. Rejected materials shall be quarantined in order to prevent use in manufacturing. When appropriate, 211.111, the time limitations are indicated. Make sure that if you have a specific period of time in which you can hold something, that you have it clearly identified. Now, that may mean that you have data indicating that there is no real time limitation, or it may be very long, but you have to have the data to prove it. Make sure you've got the data for you to show what time limitations are appropriate. Any deviation from that it shall be investigated by the quality control unit. Make sure you capture all those types of things. Control of microbiological contamination, when appropriate, written procedures for preventing microcontamination in the products shall be put in place. Make sure you have that understood. Appropriate written procedures for preventing any microcontamination in sterilized drug products. These procedures shall include any sterilization processes. Reprocessing in 211.115 talks about written procedures describing a system for reprocessing any non-conforming batches and steps taken to ensure that those reprocessed batches conform to standards and specs. You have to have all that down in clear writing. What does it do? Reprocessing will not occur without review and approval by the quality control unit. Subpart G, packaging and labeling, talks about various items through here, which we'll go through here in detail. 211.122, the materials examination and usage criteria. Written procedures for the receipt, ID, storage, handling of those things shall be in writing. Materials not meeting specs, obviously rejected. Records for each shipment will be retained, and labeling materials for each product shall be stored separately. Labeling materials include the labels that may go on it, cartons, inserts, anything along that line that has the product information on it is considered as labeling. Access to any of those areas for the labeling will be certainly controlled. It goes back earlier, we were talking about access control. Continuing on with that, destroy any obsolete or outdated materials. Gang printing, if this goes way back into the 60s, where you'd have sheets of labels that were printed, and you'd have 10 milligram on one side and 20 milligram on the other side, and they were just gang printed out in mass. That really caused a lot of problems at the time. I haven't met anybody that's done that certainly recently, but if you happen to be one of those few that do that, make sure that you have some very, very good controls in place for that. Cut labeling, where you actually cut the labels out and the label is a separate little thing. Make sure you've got some good controls in place for that. And most people today get labels put on a roll that's a elastic background or a sheet background, which that label is placed on it and is peeled off and put onto the bottle or container. Printing devices will be monitored. If you print out on that, you have to monitor those and make sure that they are in control. Printing issuance. Must have strict control when issuing printed material, whatever it is. Quantities going out and quantities coming back versus quantities used. That's what this is talking about here. All excess materials with a lot number that happens to be put onto the label is destroyed. Return materials shall be stored in a way to prevent mix-ups. Procedures will detail control of issuance. You'll have procedures in place for these types of things. 211-130, packaging and labeling operations. Physically or spatially separate materials to prevent mix-up or cross-contamination. Pretty simple, straightforward with that. Set aside filled but unlabeled product. We call that in the industry nude labeling. It's a product in a bottle and it has no label on it. You have to identify that material in mass on this pallet. You have to wrap it up. You have to have reconciliation of that. Very carefully control those types of things. Manufacturing history of the product will be available via lot or control number. Batch record must reflect the examination for correctness of the label. Make sure it's the right lot number, the right expiry date, right dosage form, right product name, whatever it is. Everything has to be verified. Packaging and labeling facilities must be inspected before and after operations and reflected in the batch record to make sure that everything has been cleared out. Tamper-resistant requirements for OTCs. All OTCs, over-the-counter products, except for some things here, you have some type of tamper evidency in place for those to visually show people that something has been tampered with. Usually you see that and you open a bottle top and you've got that foil or liner on there that you have to peel off, or poke your finger through, or it's got a band on it. You have to break the neck band, and that's your tamper evidency. Going on with this, prominent statement indicating to the consumer that whatever feature is in place is there. If it is broken or missing, don't use it. Some of the exemptions from tamper evidency here are listed. You can see those right there. You have to go into the FDA and talk to them about these things. OTC subject to NDA requirements, new drug application requirements, must notify FDA packaging changes. Again, this is OTC type of thing. This section does not affect any requirements for special packaging under a Poison Prevention Packaging Act. Just some real specific type of issues here. 211-134, your drug product inspection. It says that packaging and labeled products shall be final inspected to assure the correct labeling is applied. It means you have some type of sampling and inspection process. Sampling is done. Results of the inspection and looking at this shall be recorded in the batch record. The expiration dating. Expiration date determined by stability testing. It can't be just guessed. It can't be just based on what you've seen in the past. You have to have the data to show that your product is good for the stated period of time. Related to the storage conditions, that on the label, products to be reconstituted must have an expiration date for the unreconstituted product as well as the reconstituted product. And expiration dates have to be on the labeling. That means typically on the label that's on the container, and if it's in a box or a carton, that it's on that as well. Continuing with that, homeopathic drugs are exempt from that type of thing. Allergenic extract labeled as no U.S. standards of potency are exempt. New products for investigational use are exempt, provided they meet stability specs in their clinical investigations. And OTCs are exempt if labeling does not have a dosage and are stable for 3 years, which means you have the data showing that they're okay for 3 years. Subpart H talks about holding and distribution. Talk about the warehouse. Drug products must be quarantined prior to QC release, and storage conditions must not affect the product adversely. That could be anything like light, temp, or humidity. Those are the things that typically come to mind. Whatever it is that might affect your product, you have to understand it, and you have to control your warehousing facilities to the appropriate level. Distribution of your product. The oldest products are distributed first. That's the FIFO system. If you remember me speaking about that earlier, first in, first out. That's FIFO. Deviations are permitted if it's temporary and appropriate, meaning you got rationale and you document it. System must be in place to track your distribution. So if you have a recall, you can go back and readily find that information as to where it may have gone, your product, as necessary. Subpart I talks about lab controls, and this goes into specifications, standards, sampling plans, test procedures, whatever it is that you have in a laboratory setting, and the changes to those types of items are reviewed by the quality unit. Deviations are recorded and justified. Lab controls are scientifically sound. You can't have a laboratory in operation, whatever it is, without scientifically sound controls in place. Determine conformance of your product to specifications, whatever it is, your component, your in-process material, your stability, your sampling is accurate, whatever it happens to be, and your lab equipment is calibrated to the standards that you need to do it. 211-165. Each batch shall meet a final spec prior to release. It's difficult to think that you have to put that in statement here, but it is in statement. The lot has to be free of any objectionable bacteria. Very simple on that. Sampling and testing is described in an SOP. Accuracy, sensitivity, specificity, and reproducibility of your test methods established and documented. This is your validation requirement for your lab methodology. Lots not meeting specs are rejected. Very clear on that. 211-166. Stability shall be done. Results of that stability shall be used to determine storage conditions and expiration dates. Written procedures for your stability program will be in place, such as what do you do, sample size, intervals, conditions, everything. Make sure you've got a program well defined for your stability system, and it's followed very appropriately and very accurately. 211-170. The reserve sample shall be taken. It shall be representative of the batch. You can't take a reserve sample and then do extra steps beyond that, because that's not representative of the batch. You have to pull twice, at least twice, the quantity for a full battery of tests. It has to be the final product, and you have to take reserve samples of the API. You may even think upon yourself, do I need reserve samples of other things, such as functional excipients, anything that is necessary for me to go back and understand potential impact to the batch that I'm making. Now, obviously, if you have some issues with storing the sample, refrigerate it, may dry out, may crystallize, those things have to be taken into consideration and justified as to why you may not hold a sample of a retain for a length of period of time, and you may have to throw it away because it's not going to be representative of, say, the API that was actually used in the product. 173 covers lab animals. If you use that lab animals in your lab, they have to be maintained and controlled. And 176 says if you have penicillin, it has to be controlled in a separate facility. You can't bring penicillin in and test it in a lab in which the facility doesn't make penicillin or cephalosporins. And you don't want that. Just make sure you keep all the penicillin related products completely separated. Subpart J talks about, again, some other general requirements of your operations. 180 general requirements. It says you retain documentation at least 1 year after the expiry date of the product, or if you have an OTC, 3 years after distribution. All documents shall be readily available for review during an inspection. That's what that means. Docs can be copied. You can microfiche them. You can put them electronically. You can do whatever you wish. long as it's controlled and pursuant to a very specific procedure to keep your documents in your facility without having to build another facility just to keep your paper records. Data shall be evaluated at least annually. This is your annual product review, and procedures established to assure that management are notified of investigations, recalls, or any FDA issues in place. Make sure that if you have any investigations, management is dutifully notified. 182, 184. Here we talk about records of major equipment cleaning and maintenance, except routine maintenance and use shall be documented. You have to record all these types of things down on a form, a log, whatever it is. Records shall be made on components, containers, closures, labeling, name of the supplier, all this information is laid out here, and results of the test and individual inventory of the batch. 186 says that master records shall be maintained. They're made effective by one person. They're checked by another person. As you prepare those records to be issued to operations, it'll have the name and strength, the dosage form, the name and weight of the API, total weight of each dosage unit, a complete list of components, an accurate statement of weights, reasonable variations of those weights, and theoretical reconciliation. These are some of the definitions of your batch record controls. Batch records shall be maintained for each lot, including information that's listed here. I'm not going to read all these to you, but you can see very specifically what they're looking for. And I'd say most people go beyond this as to what they're looking for because of your unique requirements in your operation. Records reviewed by the quality unit. Any batch record is reviewed by the quality unit. Issues have to be resolved. Investigations performed. The investigation shall extend to other batches that may have been associated with the specific failure or discrepancy. This is pursuant to current requirements on investigations. I wanted to make sure you clearly understood that, because if we don't follow that, we have some issues. And we want to make sure if it affects lot 1, that we might have to look at lot 2, 3, and 4 as well. Lab records include complete data from all tests as listed here. Whatever you do in the laboratory, you record it. A good rule of thumb in this industry is if it's not documented, it's just a rumor. Make sure you document everything down. Distribution records shall be maintained of who got what, where it went, what did they get, and the quantity that they got. Complaint files are maintained. Investigations performed include the name of the product, lot number, the name, whatever it is that's there. Subpart K talks about 204. Return products have to be identified and held. You can't just get the product back and say, oh, well, we released it once, so it must be good. That's not the case. You get the material back, it's held, and it's identified as to testing as required to re-release it or disposition it, whatever that might be. If conditions of return or storage are in doubt, you have to perform an investigation. That means if you've got a refrigerated product, store at 2 to 8 degrees C, and you get it back and you're not sure that it was kept always at 2 to 8 degrees C, are you going to risk releasing that product? And the answer better be no. I better look at it and investigate it and understand what is the potential impact to it. Procedures for handling this stuff shall be in writing. 211, 208 talks about products subjected to improper storage conditions due to, say, a disaster or an accident shall not be salvaged. Again, I repeat that, shall not be salvaged. Unless, that's the key, tests can show everything is okay. Go beyond the realm of reasonability to show that everything's okay. Evaluation of those conditions indicates that the product was not exposed to harsh conditions that impact it. You can indeed do that, but you really have to have your ducks in a row. You have to have everything in place to show that you indeed did control the product, and whatever issue happened didn't have an impact on it. With that being said, that's the end of the review of the GMPs. And I present this slide to you to say that the challenge that we have in the 21st century is that every worker, whoever it may be, from the executive to a janitor, to a person who cleans the area, we're all MVP workers. And that doesn't stand for the typical sports analogy. It stands for you're masterful in what you do, you're valuable in what you do, meaning you add value to the process, whatever it is. Remember, I was talking earlier, the quality of whatever you do, quality of your work. And the P in the MVP is that you are professional, that you do it professionally, you partner, you're a player, you're a performer, and you are value added masterfully. So if you find that you need any additional discussions with this, something a little bit more in depth, maybe something a little bit more interactive, please contact us. I provide here contact information, our corporate office. We have a variety of groups, divisions that can certainly help you in a specific area. If you have some need for training, coaching, mentoring along these areas, contact someone here and they will get back to you. These are general emails. Someone will get back to you. And with that being said, I thank you for your interest in our training here. Hopefully you've got something out of this. I really work to make this as entertaining as I can, going over the Code of Federal Regulations with you. And with that being said, I thank you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to get a hold of us. Thank you.